Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be looking at Secret of Evermore on the SNES. So I was really digging this game's story. It's just really, really cool. Or at least I think it's really cool. I remember liking it back in the day, and going back looking at it now, it's still pretty enjoyable. It's kind of like a sci-fi plot from a B movie, which comes back into it in a little bit. But you have the scientist that's messing around with some technology, and he ends up pulling himself and a few of his colleagues into basically this fantasy world. They go into a place where each of them is given a section of this world, or a section of Evermore, and they can do whatever they want with it. So it basically creates a little world where all of their dreams come true, essentially. So you have someone who's really into prehistory, so they get a prehistoric world. Someone who's into kind of like the Roman Empire and antiquity, they get that kind of world. Somebody's into kind of medieval times, they get that world. Somebody's into future stuff, they get that world. And it really is kind of cool. It's populated with a whole bunch of different people and a bunch of monsters and everything. But there's an evil person in there, which is what's making everything kind of go crazy. And of course there's an evil person in there. It wouldn't be a video game if everything ended happily. So you play as just a kid, a kid and his dog, and the kid is really into like B movies and everything. So he's always quoting a bunch of stuff he's quoting a bunch of B movies that only exist in the game's world, which is really kind of enjoyable. It reminds me of just, oh gosh, when I was a kid and you'd stumble across some of those older movies that are usually in the public domain, and you watch them late at night or something like that. I played this like for the first time back in the mid 90s. One of my friends rented it, and yeah, that's kind of what we did too. So it felt really cool to kind of see all this. So as the kid, you go back in time. Well, not really go back in time. You get sucked into this world too because you're exploring the old mansion that the science experiment took place in. And then you go through the different worlds of Evermore, and you have to basically solve the problems in that little world and figure out just what's going on. You have to kind of unravel everything, and over the course of the game, you gather up a bunch of weapons, you make a whole bunch of weird one-liners about movies that don't exist, but could, and you eventually save the day. Now, there's also the story behind the game, and this is more of just rumor and everything, because I was never able to actually figure out if it was true. But my friend who introduced the game to me, he told me that we got this game instead of Secret of Mana 3. I've never been able to verify that was true or not. It's one of those many video game rumors that I've been told over the years where I don't know, it sounded good back when I was like 15, but as I got older and looked into it just out of sheer boredom one day, I really couldn't find it. So it might be true, it might not be true. I really doubt it though. The story really was what was carrying me through this game, because there are some issues that I'll talk about later that, yeah, I really wasn't. To give you a little, to skip ahead a little bit, I really was not a fan of this game. It has a great story, great setting. The characters in it are really awesome, but there's just some stuff with it that kind of makes the game fall apart a little bit for me. So let's talk a little bit about the gameplay here. There is some merit to this being a replacement for Secret of Mana 3, because the game really does play like one of the Secret of Mana games. It's pretty fun. You know, you have your character and you also have your dog. And sometimes you have to swap between, your dog and your main character in order to do things. The AI for the dog is pretty awful. Just I don't like it. It's like your typical AI for a lot of video games of this era. It's just kind of shit whenever you have an AI party and they just do whatever. You can control the dog and do different things, but yeah, it's aside from that. So you have like a percentage style attack. So in order to build up a strong enough attack, you want to attack when your character is at 100%. And right below your life meter, you see the little fraction that represents your health points. You can see that little percentage thing going up and down. If you hold down the attack button, once you have your weapon high enough level, you'll see it kind of fill up a little bit, and then you can unleash a stronger attack. It's honestly pretty great. It's one of the things that is a holdover from Secret of Mana, or at least it's where I know the game from. There are times in this game where you need to swap over to your dog in order to get over some obstacles, which I thought was pretty cool. There were times when I first played this game that I didn't know what I was doing, so I didn't know you needed to swap. Well, one, I didn't know you could, and two, I didn't know that you needed to. So going through this, playing it again, and just kind of messing around, I learned that you can swap over to the dog character, and the dog can jump over certain obstacles, which is pretty awesome. And it's also how you get past certain things in the game. It was a nice thing to, give you a reason to do it, so I'm glad that it was in the game. I have to say the hit detection with some of the weapons is really fucking awful. Especially when you have your spear. It just sucks. I don't... It's kind of hard to describe, but it's almost like your hitbox just doesn't do anything at times. I really hated using the spear. The axe isn't really all that much better, but it feels like you have to get too close to the enemies in order to attack them. And by that time, you either touch them and get hurt, or they're able to hit you, or your attack just completely whiffs. It's honestly one of the worst things in this game. It's really goddamn annoying to do it. And it is kind of hard to sit back and talk about how good or how bad the gameplay is when there were times when I just had a horrible experience with it. You also get different spells in the game, which occasionally can feel kind of hard to find. I remember when I got stuck and I needed to go to the guide, and it telling me, okay, there's this spell in this random place, and I was like, well, okay, and then I'd try to find it, and I would never be able to pull it off. So I missed quite a few of the different spells in this game. That's on me, to be perfectly honest. I do like, though, that instead of having mana, like actual magic points or anything like that, you are gathering up a bunch of different materials in order to cast these spells. Because it's alchemy. So you might need 3 parts water or 2 parts wax in order to cast a spell or something like that. It's kind of a cool way of doing things, and that's one of the parts of the game that I really liked. I think the game looks really great. Just the pixel art in this is wonderful. It is one of those kind of later SNES titles, but it looks really, really good. There are some times when it's kind of hard to kind of line up some of your attacks, like I mentioned with the spear and with the axe, but those are kind of minor issues. Overall, it's a very beautiful game. I love the I love the separation in the art styles between the different stages. It's cool how everything kind of works together. You don't find enemies, for the most part, from one stage in the next stage. It's really cool to see all this stuff. I think the bosses look really great. The boss battles are a lot of fun. And yeah, everything that you need to do is pretty easy to identify, especially all the different parts of the enemies that you can actually hit. and it's pretty easy to tell what the weak points on these different monsters are. I really have no complaints about the graphics or anything like that. It's fairly easy to tell what's going on in the game, where you can and can't go, where you need to hit the monsters. Everything just really works well visually, and it's a very beautiful game. It's not the best looking Super Nintendo game, but it is a very good looking one. It's also pretty easy to avoid the enemy attacks and see them coming as well. So yeah, overall visually this is just a wonderful game. So I have some mixed feelings about Secret of Evermore. I liked quite a bit of it. I like most of the gameplay. I like the boss fights. I like the magic system. I like the fact that you're running around with your little dog doing stuff. I like that you can swap between your dog and your main character there. I like the overall story of you having to go back through these different periods and find stuff. It's really a fun game, for the most part, until it gets on its bullshit. And yeah, there's some bullshit in this game that I really don't like. It feels in some ways like one of those Sierra Adventures where you miss one thing and all of a sudden you're screwed. So if you have an item that you need to trade at one point and you accidentally trade it for something else, and you just get stuck. Like, you can't keep going. You need to reset and start over. Or at least that was my experience with it. Like when I accidentally traded an item that I was supposed to keep and use to buy a ticket, and come to find out that I wasn't supposed to do that because I can't find another version of that item in this stupid frickin' world. That was really the only thing that I hated, was when it got on its bullshit like that. And I was like, this is stupid. Why is this necessary for me to do things? And I don't know, it calls back to some of the games where, how can I put this? It calls back to some games where you need the manual in order to do stuff. And if you don't have it, you're just kind of screwed. Or if you don't have a friend that beat the game, you're just kind of screwed. For the most part, the game was pretty easy until it came to those random points where I was just like, well, this sucks. But yeah, aside from that stuff, everything else about the game I really enjoyed. So it's one of those things where it has this huge problem that I absolutely hated, but everything else was pretty enjoyable. Overall, it is a fun game. It's just one of those games that you kind of need a guide in order to get through at some point. So let's talk about some memories with the game, because I don't really want to leave it on a sour note like that. This was a game that my friend and I rented growing up, and it was a lot of fun to play. Just because I didn't know much about the Super Nintendo at the time, and he was kind of my link to Nintendo. He sort of knew everything about the Super Nintendo, or at least that's what I thought at the time. The neighborhood I grew up in was all Sega Genesis, and we did not really rent or play a lot of Super Nintendo games. So I remember playing this. I think we rented it at one point, but the first time I played it was on ROM. Or on a ROM with an emulator, and I thought it was great. It was confusing as all hell, but I thought it was a lot of fun back then. So that kind of colored my experience a little bit when I started playing it for this. And for the most part, it stayed with that same experience of, picking something up and discovering something that I didn't know about. So it was fun to go back and revisit this and just kind of see what my friend had been talking about, and also look up some more information to see if my friend was actually telling the truth or if he was just kind of lying again. I think he was lying again. It's not that big of a deal, but it is kind of fun to go back and play these things. So those are my memories about this game when I was a kid. So let's wrap this whole thing up. Overall, I think this is a good game. I don't think it's great. I think it's got some problems. It's got at least one major problem that I really hated. And yeah, that kind of soured the whole experience for me a little bit. But I did have fun playing it. I really I like Secret of Mana, and if you like Secret of Mana, there's a decent chance you'll like this game. I don't think Secret of Mana has as much bullshit in it as this game does, where stuff just kind of feels a little bit cheaper. Or at least the game feels like it should explain certain things that it just flat out doesn't. That's the only time when I would get a little upset with this game, where it would expect me to know certain things or expect me to know how to do certain things that I just flat out didn't. And that's kind of where, the manual or a walkthrough or a strategy guide or something would have came in handy when I was playing this. I eventually had to look stuff up just because I was running around and ended up being way more leveled than I needed to be for some things. I think it is a good game. It's just, it's one of those that I just have a lot of mixed feelings about. So that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and definitely let me know if you've had a better experience with this game than I did. I will talk to you all later. Bye.